Tax season is here once more, and although it's not time to panic yet, it does have many people wondering, what am I doing? Anyway, guys, in this video, we're going to break down taxes, the new information coming into 2024, as well as some key strategies for filing your taxes this year, or should I say last year, for 2023. Anyway, guys, I'm Pokemon Classics, and I invite you to join me for a little tax educational video. Let's roll the intro. Hey everybody, what's up from Pokemon Classics, reminding you that the classics never go out of style. It's that time of year again, tax season is upon us, and that means it's time for our annual tradition of another tax video, designed specifically for collectors and resellers out there, and hopefully you all find this helpful. Now, I need to start this off with a disclaimer. I am not a tax expert, nor am I a CPA, and you should probably seek professional help from a CPA of your own. But I did want to go over a couple of baseline pieces of information. First, we'll talk a little bit about the recent tax updates going into 2024, but also 2023 since that's this year's tax season. We'll also take a look at the distinction between filing taxes as a business versus filing as a hobby. And contrary to popular belief, there are some advantages and disadvantages to each of those, and it's really dependent upon your situation. Finally, we'll take a look at how to prepare for tax season, and that's all a matter of keeping accurate and detailed records, but also doing your research and arming yourself with education. But anyway, with those types of things in play, tax season doesn't have to be so scary. First, let's take you back, way back to once upon a time when in order to be eligible for a 1099-K, you had to meet two requirements. You had to have at least 200 transactions and over $20,000 in total sales. However, when the Inflation Reduction Act came out, all of that changed, and the actual threshold for receiving a 1099-K was dropped to just $600. Now, you may be asking yourself, what is a 1099-K? And simply put, it's just a tax reporting form that online sales platforms and other entities are required to send after a certain amount to both sellers or users of their platform, as well as directly to the IRS, so that money is accounted for. And then it becomes incumbent upon you, receiving the 1099-K, to account for that money on your tax statements. Anyway, shortly after the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRS actually put this new threshold on hold because of how difficult it was to implement for online sales platforms and other entities. Suddenly, they were required to send out millions and millions more 1099-Ks, and that just wasn't enough time to process that and put all the infrastructure in place to do so. So actually, after delaying it for several years, this year is the first year where that threshold has actually been moved, and now it's at $5,000, with the full intention of making it $600 next year in 2024. Now, you may be rightfully asking yourself, why does all of this matter? And technically, it shouldn't. You're already required to report any income earned, regardless of the source or of the amount on your federal income taxes. But the reality is that a majority of small sellers simply don't do this, preferring to go under the radar. Now, this is problematic for two reasons. First, it's illegal, but second, as that threshold for 1099-Ks gets gradually reduced, more and more sellers are going to be in for a rude awakening when suddenly they're required to file taxes. Tax liabilities can easily add up to 30 or 40% or more of actual profit, and especially if you don't keep careful records, that could be a problem. So my recommendations in this video are threefold. First, see a CPA or a tax professional to help you get started with your own selling as well as your tax situation. Second, do your research. There are a number of potential deductions out there for businesses and even a number of different ways to file taxes on collectibles, and each one may have its own unique advantages and disadvantages. Finally, keep detailed and accurate records of everything: inventory, purchases, sales. The more information you have, the better situation you'll be in. When it comes to reselling collectibles, there are really two different options for tax reporting. You can file as hobby income using a Schedule D, which counts as capital gains, or you can file as business income using a Schedule C. Now, hobby income has some unique differences, which I've tried to highlight on this slide. First, the marginal tax brackets at the federal level maxes out at 28%, and that's because there's a collectibles rate cap at 28%, even though those marginal rates federally go as high as 37%. You'll never have to pay more than 28% on collectibles profit. Now, you're also on the hook for state income tax, and some states don't have any, so it could be as low as 0, but the highest income tax states go over 13%, and that's pretty substantial, so that all depends on where you live. Now, one of the biggest differences is how it approaches deductions. You can still claim the cost basis, so that way you're only being taxed on the profit of the sales, but you're not allowed any additional business deductions when it comes to hobby income. Now, business income, on the other hand, is an entirely different story. First, there is no cap on the federal income tax brackets. Those marginal brackets go as high as 37%, so if you're doing particularly well and you're in that top echelon of earners, you could be paying as much as 37% of the profit back to the federal government. The state tax works exactly the same way. It could be as low as 0% or as high as 13% or more, depending on which state you live in. One of the biggest differences here is you have an additional tax to pay as business income, and that's the self-employment tax, which currently stands at 15.3%, which can be a really big deal. But this is where the magic comes in. This is the major difference, is that not only are you allowed to take the cost of goods as a deduction, but you're also allowed to make a number of business expense deductions that can help lower the profit. To keep things simple, we're going to take a look at a hypothetical example, analyzing how each of these different filing methodologies stack up against one another. Let's assume you work a regular 9-to-5 W-2 job that pays $60,000 a year. You've already had taxes withheld throughout the year to cover that 10% marginal tax bracket, as well as that 12% marginal tax bracket, and then a little bit of the 22% bracket. But on top of that, you have a side hustle selling cards on eBay, and you made $10,000 in total profit after subtracting the expenses of the purchases of the cards themselves. You're filing this as capital gains using a Schedule D as hobby income, so you'd be on the hook for both federal and state taxes. Now, federally, that would put you in the 22% bracket, or $2,200 of liability, and state is going to differ, but here in Minnesota, we have pretty high taxes, and that would be the 6.8% tax category, which would be $680. In total, that would leave a tax liability of $2,880 because we're not eligible for any additional business deductions. However, if we apply that exact same situation but now file as business income, the result is going to be very different. Once again, we'll assume the $60,000 job on top of the $10,000 side hustle on eBay, and we're still on the hook for 22% federal income tax, 6.8% state income tax, but now we also have to cover the 15.3% self-employment tax. When we add all of those together, that puts our taxes at $4,410, which is substantially higher than if we would have filed as hobby income using the Schedule D. But wait, we haven't factored in business deductions yet, and this is where the magic comes in for a lot of sellers that choose to go this route rather than as hobby income. Let's say you make your own product photography for listings for sales, as well as making social media posts and videos like I'm making right now. Well, you're probably going to need a camera for that and some lighting equipment. You might also need a laptop to actually maintain your listings and to orchestrate your sales. Maybe there's some office supplies that are going to factor in this, or a home office area, a portion of your house that you can dedicate towards business. Maybe you travel to various conventions and have meals while you're there. There might be some deductions available. There's perhaps the travel expenses to the post office and back, and other places where you're driving your vehicle for specific business reasons. There's a whole host of deductions, and that's what we're going to talk about in a minute. But under this scenario, we easily added up $6,160 of deductions against our $10,000 profit. Well, now our profit is significantly less. We're only looking at $3,840, which brings our tax liability down substantially to just $1,649. So this is the magic of those deductions, as long as they're reasonable and are necessary to run your business, as many of these are. I'm actually going to spend the rest of the video going over some potential deductions. It's not a comprehensive list, but it's some things to think about. But before I do, I want to stress one more time, not to wait to seek a CPA or a tax expert of your own, because some of these things could apply to your current situation, or maybe others are out there available as well that even I didn't think of. So definitely consult with a professional and see what's going to be the best option for you, because what's right for somebody might not be right for anybody else's situation. Now, before I get too far ahead of myself, I should clarify a couple of things. First, there are various rules and requirements to actually qualify as a business, and while these primarily boil down to actively trying to make a profit and taking steps regularly to do so, you should probably consult with the IRS website as well as with a tax professional to make sure that that's relevant to your situation. Also, it's worth noting that many people have this mistaken assumption that it's much more difficult to become a business than it actually is. In reality, all you need to do is be actively seeking a profit and making sales and making money, and by default, you're acting as a sole proprietor. You can fill out additional paperwork to become an LLC or an S-Corp, but those aren't really necessary for most resellers out there, so it's actually fairly easy. Finally, you should know that filing as a business does require a Schedule C be filled out, and that's a pretty daunting and extensive set of paperwork, especially if you're new to it. So just be aware of that going into it, that you'll probably need professional help with that, at least the first time. It's something I do every time, is consult with an expert. You probably should too. Perhaps the biggest business expense is fees and subscriptions. Now, eBay gets the reputation as Feebay because the seller fees are pretty high and is often one of the biggest expenses, but that's deductible. Same thing if you're selling on any other platform like TCG Player or PayPal, you can deduct those fees, those seller fees, against your total profit. Same thing with grading fees if you're grading cards and selling the graded cards, or even the subscription to the site. I know PSA has a yearly membership for $100. I just renewed mine recently, and that's something that I'll be deducting. Software is also deductible if it's used for a business purpose. Some people are using QuickBooks or other software for their record keeping, or maybe you have editing software of some kind for photos or for videos. One that I use is Epidemic Sound for music, since I want royalty-free music for these YouTube videos so that they don't get copyright claimed. One that I think a lot of people miss out on, though, is education and research. For example, if you are subscribed specifically to a Patreon that's providing market information and market dynamics, or places to buy products at a discount, that is something that's potentially deductible. There's also a number of deductions for business supplies. Now, business supplies can mean a lot of different things. It could be office supplies. We're thinking like paper and ink for printing out shipping labels, scissors for cutting out those shipping labels. Maybe you bought a file cabinet or folders. I keep a lot of hard copies of my records because I am a boomer after all, so that's something I want on hand in my file cabinet. Storage for cards is another thing that I think is really useful that a lot of people are purchasing to keep their cards protected and safe. Whether you have storage boxes, card sleeves, maybe you have a combination of card savers for grading purposes or top loaders for personal storage purposes or binders. If you are keeping your products safe and secure and using those products to ship cards, that's something you could deduct. Same with packaging materials, and packaging materials can add up really quickly. Whether you're purchasing bubble mailers, bubble wrap, shipping boxes, boxing tape. In fact, eBay actually offers a coupon code to anybody with a store subscription where they can buy eBay branded supplies at a discount that I find really helpful. So if you're into any of that, look for that coupon code in your eBay account. Also, there's some other things. Maybe you have a P.O. box or a scale for weighing your packages before purchasing and attaching the shipping, because the weight can often dictate how much it costs. Or business cards. That's one thing I do with every single order I package is I put in a business card. That way people can find me on social media in addition to my eBay store. Now, business equipment can mean a lot of different things depending on how you operate your business. But regardless of what type of business you're operating with reselling, you're probably going to need a computer or a laptop of some kind to upload those photos, to maintain those listings, to print your shipping labels. And there might be some peripherals as well, monitors, printers, sound system, etc. Another one that's particularly relevant to people in the collectible space is a camera or lights or lenses. If you're taking pictures of cards that you're listing for sale, you want to make sure that those pictures are attractive and that they're done well. Same with any social media posts or videos that you're putting out there for the purpose of advertising. One of the things I absolutely love is this light box that I purchased, and that makes it really efficient and quality when it comes to taking photos. There's also a number of people out there that have a spot uniquely situated for work, and they'll have like a desk along with like a microphone like this one or other audio equipment. I actually purchased a teleprompter recently, the Elgato prompter, so that I can look into the camera as I'm making these videos and see my slides. That way I don't lose my place or lose my focus. It's really helpful. I like it a lot. I'm using it right now. But there's some other expenses as well. If you use a cell phone exclusively or partially for business, you may be able to deduct a piece of that. Security cameras, a vehicle perhaps, if you're using that exclusively for business. There's a lot of different options for what qualifies as business equipment. Now, this is the fun one, and you've heard me say it on this channel before, but my favorite part of collecting and selling is meeting other people at events and conventions. If you're traveling to events or conventions with the specific purpose of selling cards or working with other people for business purposes, some of that may be deductible. The tickets or passes to those events, the registration fee, the vendor booth fee, all of those different things. In some cases, the travel might also be deductible. The flights, the hotel stays, the car rentals, the luggage fees, even the meals that you have while on business trips. Now, that doesn't count your daily meals on a regular basis, even if you're working from home. This has to be out of the city for unique business-related situations. Mileage is another one that I think is important. There's a standard mileage deduction of 65.5 cents per mile, and that has to be miles driven specifically for a business purpose. But if you're going back and forth to the post office every day, you keep track of that, those miles can add up pretty quickly and save you some money. Finally, this last category is sort of a catch-all for everything else, but one thing people don't often think of is advertising. If you pay to have a logo done or a design done for your company or for your product, that's something that's potentially deductible. Or maybe you have a web page dedicated to your brand or to selling your products. Maybe you pay for promoted listings on a site like eBay, or perhaps you buy merch or signs that you're taking to conventions or just wearing yourself for the purpose of advertising. That is potentially deductible as well. Most people operate out of their home and have a home office, a space designated exclusively for their business and only for their business. And if that's the case, you can use the simplified deduction for the home office for $5 per square feet. There is a limitation on how much space you can designate, but that's a potential option as well. Tax preparation is another one. If you've used an accountant or a CPA to help you with your business taxes and you pay them at the end for it, you can potentially deduct the accounting services and the fees that you paid for it. Finally, this is a big one, but the qualified business income is a deduction available for any pass-through entity, which means sole proprietors or single owner LLCs, where the money that you're making is basically just to yourself. It's not a larger corporation. You're entitled to deduct 20% of that income as long as you've made under a certain amount, tax-free. So it's basically getting 20% off, and then the other 80% of the profit is subject to those regular taxes. So that can be a big deal as well, and if you know to ask about it when you meet with your CPA, that might be a tax savings. Anyway, these are just some of the many potential deductions out there, and we're really just scratching the surface. I strongly suggest you all consult with a CPA or a tax professional to figure out what works best for you, because everybody's situation is a little bit different. Anyway, I hope this video helped alleviate some of the tax time anxiety that people are often experiencing this time of year, and with the right tools and the right education, taxes don't have to be something to fear. Anyway, guys, I'm Pokemon Classics, reminding you all that the classics never go out of style. Been great seeing you all here. We'll see you all with the next video, and until then, don't forget to have fun. That is what this hobby is all about. We'll see you guys. Bye, everybody.